Welcome to Treasures of History, where the past comes alive. Here we uncover the secrets of ancient civilizations, explore the rise and fall of mighty empires, and journey through the mysteries that shaped our world. From the sands of Egypt to the ruins of Rome, every episode brings you closer to the wonders of history. Subscribe now and let's rediscover the past, one story at a time. Wow! What a discovery! Scientists found some ancient artifacts near King Tut's tomb. Turns out his final resting place looks more like a public cemetery, with about a dozen wooden coffins buried there over 3,600 years ago. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating a bit. The other 11 tombs weren't exactly right next to King Tut, but they were pretty close to Luxor. These new discoveries in Egyptian tombs are helping us understand what life was like in ancient Egypt. And guess what? Ancient Egyptians weren't all that different from us. For example, it seems women have always loved jewellery. Archaeologists found a beautifully crafted necklace with 30 amethyst beads, 2 agate ones, and a charm shaped like a hippo's head. I bet it was a real trend back in the day. They also found 2 copper mirrors. One had a handle shaped like a lotus flower, and the other was decorated with Hathor, the goddess of the sky, women, fertility and love. These recent digs near King Tut's burial site led to another big find for the first time in thousands of years. Parts of Queen Hatshepsut's Valley Temple were uncovered. She was believed to be the second female pharaoh, ruling with courage and wisdom, and she left a legacy as strong as stone. Her long-hidden temple opens a window into a time full of power, intrigue, and spiritual devotion. Archaeologists found over 1,000 beautifully carved stone blocks near her secret temple. Very few women in ancient Egypt ever made it to the throne. Nearby, another tomb was found belonging to the overseer of Queen Tetischer's palace, a man named Jehuti Mes. It looks like Hatshepsut had even more tombs built in the Upper Deir el-Bahari area. These tombs weren't pyramids, but were carved into rock, showing a different ancient take on protecting the soul in the afterlife. The experts recovered some amazing items from the site, things like clay toys, mummy masks, winged scarabs and amulets. Sadly, there were definitely more treasures originally, but over the centuries non-archaeologists, probably looters, stumbled upon the site and took the more valuable stuff. Still, they left behind some fascinating items like pottery used to serve bread and meat, and archers' bows connecting the tomb owners to the Egyptian military. At the same time, protecting the soul was way more serious than you might think, especially if you're wandering around Luxor looking for ancient secrets. You're not afraid of King Tut's curse, are you? Let me tell you what happened to those who weren't. But promise me you'll take it seriously, okay? For years, Egyptologists, especially those who believed in supernatural stuff, were convinced there was a curse surrounding the discovery of King Tut's tomb. That belief started with the mysterious and early deaths of several of the people who found the tomb in 1922, with no logical explanation for why they died. It was easier to blame the supernatural than deal with all the confusion, but in the end it wasn't a curse. Most likely it was radiation that killed them. Now you might be wondering, where would radiation come from? After all, radioactive materials like radium weren't discovered until the 19th century, and ancient Egyptians, cool as their pyramids are, didn't have any glowing tomb tech. So, what's the real story? Toxic waste might be the culprit. Dangerous levels of radiation from uranium and other hazardous materials could have been sealed inside the tomb for over 3,000 years. It's said that the burial chamber in Tutankhamun's tomb has such high radiation levels that anyone stepping inside could get a lethal dose and suffer from incurable radiation sickness. Funny enough, you could get a similar level of radiation exposure if you forget to throw out that rotten dinner from your fridge a month ago. Just kidding, kind of. And it's not just King Tut's tomb. Digging up ancient Egyptian artifacts is exciting but risky. Old Kingdom tombs across Egypt show unusually high radiation levels. Geiger counters picked up radiation at 2 sites near the pyramids of Giza, and radon gas, a radioactive substance, was found in many underground tombs in Saqqara. Interestingly, experts believe the ancient tomb builders knew something about poisons. Many tomb walls have scary warnings carved into them. One inscription reads, "Whoever disturbs this tomb will perish from a disease no doctor can diagnose." Another grim message simply says, "Forbidden." A hideout for evil spirits? That only added to people's fear that supernatural curses haunted these ancient sites. Ominous warnings have fascinated archaeologists for ages, but things got a lot more intense about 100 years ago when Lord Carnarvon, the guy who funded the excavation of King Tut's tomb in 1922, died under mysterious circumstances. He had gone into the tomb with several others to check out the treasures. Arthur Weigel, another British Egyptologist who was there when the tomb was opened, and who's actually credited with starting the whole curse legend, died in the 1930s in his early 50s. It's likely radiation exposure had something to do with it. In total, 6 out of the 26 people present when the tomb was first opened died within 10 years, each from different causes, not just from X-ray exposure. The list includes suffocation, strokes, heart failure, pneumonia, and even poisoning. Pretty grim, right? But one man managed to walk into that tomb and somehow escape the so-called curse, Howard Carter himself. Some pointed to his survival as proof that the curse wasn't real. After the tomb was uncovered, Carter wrote several books and moved from archaeology into the antiquities trade, working with various museums. While he wasn't harmed or killed, rumours swirled about how the curse may have affected him in other ways. One popular story linked him romantically to Lord Carnarvon's daughter, Evelyn. Some said he was madly in love with her, but she married someone else, so he stayed single for life. Others claimed they had an affair while she was in Egypt, which ended after her father's death and her permanent departure from the country. But there wasn't much solid evidence to back any of that up. Evelyn was only 6 when they first met, and they remained friends until Carter's death. She was one of the few people who attended his funeral, and she denied there was ever a romantic relationship, saying they weren't even that close. A year after the big discovery, Evelyn married politician Sir Brograve Beauchamp and had a daughter with him. That same year, the Beauchamp family toured King Tut's tomb, with Carter himself guiding them. Carter never married, and aside from those Evelyn rumours, he wasn't known to have any romantic relationships at all. While the idea of a curse adds a mysterious twist to his story, it seems Carter had always preferred to keep people at a distance. He just wasn't a very social guy. In 1939, after struggling with a serious illness, he passed away at age 64, which was about average for someone living in the UK at that time. So no one really thought his death was suspicious or linked to some ancient curse. But interestingly, when he died, they found several artifacts from King Tut's tomb in his London apartment. Those were eventually returned to Egypt, and some people saw that as the final chapter of the curse. Who knows? Maybe if he hadn't kept those souvenirs, he might have lived longer. Then again, maybe all those other deaths weren't as strange as they seemed. Still, there were a few bizarre events during the excavation that fueled the curse theory. Lord Carnarvon was bitten by a mosquito, and the bite got badly infected. At the moment they opened the tomb, there was a weird blackout in Cairo during a sandstorm. And back in England, Carnarvon's dog Susie apparently started barking wildly at nothing, according to his family and staff. Even stranger, the moment her owner's heart stopped, Susie let out a howl and suddenly dropped dead. Spooky, right? So maybe radiation wasn't the whole story after all, and maybe those ancient artifacts really were cursed. It's creepy when you think about it. Unlike many other ancient Egyptian tombs, King Tutankhamun's burial place stayed completely hidden and untouched by looters for 3,000 years. One reason was that it was smaller than most tombs and cleverly tucked away in the Valley of the Kings. By the time it was found, the area had already been thoroughly explored. The tomb's entrance was totally buried under debris from the construction of a nearby tomb, which helped keep it secret. There were also no inscriptions or signs outside marking it. Time played a big role in preserving it all in nearly perfect condition until the 1920s, when a man named Howard Carter finally found a way in. But was Carter really the great hero everyone thought he was? Some recent findings suggest he might have been more cunning than previously believed. People used to think of him not just as a treasure hunter, but as a true archaeologist. From a young age, he was obsessed with ancient Egypt. He started by sketching carvings and inscriptions found in old tombs. After finding King Tut's remains, Carter spent a decade carefully documenting and handling all kinds of objects, from golden thrones and statues to chariots and even the king's boat. They were supposed to be shipped up the Nile to the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. Well, at least that's the official story. But more recent discoveries suggest that not all the artifacts actually made it into the hands of Egyptian authorities. A secret letter revealed Howard Carter's little side policy, 10 for them, 1 for me. The letter was sent to Sir Alan Gardner, a linguist and a close friend of Carter's, and it dates back to 1922. In it, Carter told Gardner he had discovered the tomb and was asking for advice. In another letter from 1934, Gardner thanks Carter for a small amulet sent as a gift. Carter claimed it didn't come from Tutankhamun's tomb, but yeah, it obviously did. Even the British director of the Egyptian Museum knew Carter was up to something shady, but he couldn't prove it. He compared Gardner's amulet to another from the tomb and, surprise, they were identical. Gardner was so frustrated about being put in that awkward position that he vented in another letter to Carter. Still, he chose to be a loyal friend and didn't throw Carter under the bus. Instead, he just advised him to quietly return the stolen piece to Cairo. And by the way, just like they'd ask you to like this video and subscribe to Brightside for more cool history stuff. Anyway, that wasn't the only shady thing Carter may have done after the discovery. In 1947, a man named Alfred Lucas, who worked with a controversial archaeologist, published an article in a small Cairo journal. He claimed that Carter had secretly opened the burial chamber on his own before the official unveiling, and then closed it again like nothing ever happened. Why would he do that? Well, the theory is that Carter and his team might have snuck in early to grab some of the loot. Obviously, they couldn't sell any of it while they were still alive, but apparently they planned for it to be sold off in auctions after their deaths. Of course, Carter never admitted to any of this, but he never officially denied it either. The Egyptian authorities weren't taking any chances, though. They banned him from the tomb for a while. Some people link this whole looting situation to King Tut's infamous curse. If you've never heard of the curse before, here's the deal. After the tomb was discovered, rumours spread that anyone who disturbed the boy pharaoh's resting place would be cursed with terrible luck. It wasn't like a mummy suddenly came to life and went on a rampage or anything, but people said those involved started dying mysteriously. The most famous cursed death was that of George Herbert, the 5th Earl of Carnarvon, the British aristocrat who financed the whole expedition. He died just a year after the tomb was opened. People love to call it mysterious, but the truth is, Herbert was in really bad health when he arrived in Cairo and ended up dying of a pretty ordinary illness. Let's look at the numbers. Tons of people were involved with the tomb, from security guards and archaeologists to helpers and staff. And yes, some of them died not long after the site was opened to the public. As much as we all want the curse to be real because it makes for a great story, statistically speaking, if you've got a group of people working on something that big, it's not unusual for a few of them to pass away over the next several years. In fact, most of the so-called curse victims lived another 20 years or more. Even Lord Carnarvon's daughter lived into the 1980s, over 50 years after the tomb was opened. And Howard Carter himself lived until 1939, a full 16 years after the big find. Some have even suggested the whole curse thing was just a clever PR stunt. See, Carter was overwhelmed by nosy reporters when the tomb was discovered, so maybe he came up with the idea of a curse to scare them off. But back to the question, what exactly was stolen from King Tut's tomb? Apparently some jewellery. And maybe Carter himself took it. According to a French expert who did deep research using old photos from inside the tomb in the 1920s, he compared them with items in museums and auction houses and started piecing together where some of Tut's missing treasures had ended up. First, there's this necklace that had been on Tut's chest. It was broken into several pieces. Some of those ended up at the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art in Missouri via Carter. Other pieces surfaced in a necklace owned by anonymous collectors who tried to sell it in 2015, but couldn't. Even the Nelson Atkins Museum confirmed the story on their website. Then there was part of a headdress, some beads. One of the items that apparently belonged to King Tut was also stolen by Carter. It was turned into a necklace and is now on display at the St. Louis Art Museum. Another fancy collar made of glazed ceramic charms spent some time at the Metropolitan Museum in New York. Fortunately, it was returned to Egypt just over a decade ago, and yep, that one was likely taken by Carter too. But putting the missing artifacts aside, King Tutankhamun still gave us a ton of incredible stuff that has helped us learn so much about this fascinating ancient culture. Let's start with his famous burial mask, a massive 21-inch golden work of art inlaid with semi-precious stones and coloured glass paste. It weighs 22 pounds and shows the boy pharaoh with a long beard and a headdress, featuring a cobra and a vulture. On the back, there's a magical inscription from an ancient Egyptian spiritual book meant to help him function just as well in the afterlife. Apparently, Tut also loved board games. Archaeologists found 4 of them in his tomb, some made of ivory. They also found a pair of golden sandals, although they were probably more for show than for comfort. In fact, it's likely he never even wore them during his lifetime. Speaking of style, it turns out Tut was quite the fashion-forward ruler. They even found a mannequin in his tomb, which he used for choosing, fitting and storing his clothes and jewellery. And it looks like the boy king enjoyed music too, based on the 2 trumpets discovered in his tomb. They were actually played during a 1935 BBC broadcast, but today they're far too fragile to handle. Now, have you ever heard of Göbekli Tepe? It's an ancient site in Turkey that literally made historians rewrite history books. Over 11,000 years ago, a group of prehistoric people created a mysterious masterpiece. It's even older than Stonehenge. Before this discovery, archaeologists thought ancient people didn't know about iron or how to make good pottery. And that stable living only started when farming came into play. But Göbekli Tepe flipped that idea on its head. It showed that temples, not farms, may have been what led humans to settle down. Enter Professor Klaus Schmidt, the man whose findings changed everything. He was able to prove that hunter-gatherer societies were actually laying the groundwork for settled life. Back in the 1960s, other archaeologists had surveyed the same area but completely missed the mark. They found a hill with limestone slabs scattered around and assumed it was just a medieval cemetery. They had no clue what was actually buried there. In 1994, Schmidt began his own survey of prehistoric sites in the region. Surprise! He quickly realized he'd stumbled onto something extraordinary. Unlike the flat, barren plateaus nearby, Göbekli Tepe had a rounded hilltop that rose about 50 feet above the surrounding land. Funny enough, the name Göbekli Tepe actually means Potbelly Hill. Schmidt was convinced this wasn't something nature had done. It had to be the work of humans, and those broken limestone pieces that others had thought were gravestones, they were way more interesting than that. It was like finding buried treasure. The pieces took on a whole new meaning, and Schmidt's team was ready to dive into the mystery hidden beneath the surface. To their amazement, they didn't find any signs of a settlement, no fireplaces, no homes, not even the usual clay figurines found in similar ancient sites. But they did discover that these ancient people used stone tools like hammers. So Schmidt and his team took a wild guess at the age of the stone structures, and radiocarbon dating at the site backed up their estimates. Suddenly, the mysterious vibe of the place started to make sense. It was like watching a puzzle slowly come together. You might think people back then didn't have the tools to build something as amazing as Göbekli Tepe. But that's not true. These prehistoric folks used flint tools instead of fancy metal chisels. They were actually pretty skilled at carving the soft limestone into pillars right on the spot. Then they'd carry the pillars a short distance to the hilltop and stand them upright. Once a stone circle was finished, they'd bury it in layers of dirt. Over time, they added more circles, and voila, you've got a mind-blowing sight to impress future generations. In their first year of digging, the team analysed 15,000 animal bones, all from wild creatures. These people didn't have livestock or grow their own food. They hunted for every meal, but things were about to change. The site had everything they needed to start farming. Scientists say they had wild sheep and wild grains that were perfect for domestication. Guess what? Just 20 meters away, geneticists found evidence of the world's oldest domesticated wheat in a prehistoric village. This incredible discovery completely changed how we think about civilization. In the past, experts believed people had to learn how to farm and settle down in one place before they could build temples or develop complex societies. But guess what again? Schmidt's research turned that idea upside down. He argued that the huge effort involved in building these amazing structures actually led to the rise of advanced societies. That means social and cultural changes came before farming. Schmidt had a fascinating theory about Göbekli Tepe. He thought it might have been a special burial site where people left their loved ones behind. And here's where it gets interesting. The burial site was decorated with fancy statues and spiritual symbols representing gods from the spirit world. The idea that Göbekli Tepe could have been a sacred place adds a whole new layer of complexity to the story. Even though we may never know the site's exact purpose, Schmidt's insights invite us to think about how deeply early hunter-gatherer societies might have respected their dead and believed in an afterlife. Now let's talk about the real stars of the show, those incredible T-shaped stone pillars that dominate Göbekli Tepe. These mysterious structures stand between 10 and 20 feet tall and likely represent stylized human figures. But one figure stands out, a three-dimensional carving of a lion. This artwork really sparks the imagination. Why? Because it suggests lions once roamed Anatolia during the Neolithic era. The standing stones are arranged in circular formations, each set inside a rectangular pit. Every circle has a similar setup. Two large T-shaped pillars in the center, surrounded by slightly smaller ones facing inward. Pretty neat design, right? These towering pillars can reach up to 16 feet high and weigh between 7 and 10 tons. Some are plain and simple, while others are covered in detailed carvings. Foxes, scorpions, and vultures come to life, slithering and twisting across the sides. But it's not just animals. Some pillars also have abstract human shapes, and even tiny carvings of clothing, including belts. There's one pillar, though, that totally steals the show, kind of like a rock star. It seems to show a comet crashing into Earth during a cold spell that lasted around 1,000 years. Earlier studies of ice cores in Greenland hinted at this event, but now the carvings at Göbekli Tepe seem to back it up. The images on the pillars are like an ancient comic strip. One even shows a headless human figure. Researchers plugged these images into a computer and found connections to star constellations, suggesting this temple might have also been an ancient observatory. It's like our ancestors were recording a massive cosmic disaster in their own symbolic way. Archaeologists have been digging at Göbekli Tepe since the mid-1990s, peeling back layers of history and revealing just how complex everything really is. And they don't plan to stop anytime soon. The excavation could go on for another 150 years. Who knows what else they'll uncover? You see, Göbekli Tepe has been classified as a purely ritual site, with no signs of regular domestic life. We used to assume that because there was no water nearby, it couldn't support even semi-permanent communities. But scientists now believe it's time to change that thinking and look at Göbekli Tepe with fresh eyes. Maybe there was a group of people who lived nearby but didn't stay in one spot all the time. They moved around, but their civilization stayed rooted in that area more or less permanently. Göbekli Tepe isn't just home to one temple. It's a whole complex with over 20 ancient buildings. And as archaeologists dig deeper into these wonders, they're discovering a unique layout. Each structure has two large central pillars surrounded by smaller elements and dividing walls. History holds secrets, and we're here to uncover them. If you enjoyed this journey through the past, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel and ring the bell, because there's so much more to explore. From ancient empires to forgotten civilizations, Treasures of History is your gateway to the world that once was. Your support keeps the stories alive. Thank you for watching, and see you in